Well, without further ado, I want to go ahead and get us started by introducing you guys to our team. So here on the screen, you can see our team. We're a small staff of 6, but we're mighty in force. Today with us, you'll see that we have Jake Sinatra, our grant director, and he will be here with us along with Laura Matteo, who is our communications manager. I myself am a grants manager, and I'm also here with Maya Curtis, another grants manager here at CAC. Just briefly, just wanted to let you know that each grant manager has a portfolio of about 100 organizations that we work with throughout the grant cycle. Please reach out to any of us if you're unsure who your grant manager is. And if you're a returning grantee, you probably already have a grant manager assigned to you. And who your primary contact is will be the person that will be reaching out to. If you're a first-time applicant, feel free to reach out to any of us and we'll be happy to assist you. A grant manager will be assigned to new applicants once you have completed your application this season. Before we begin, we want to acknowledge the land that we stand on and the place that we call Cuyahoga County. Cuyahoga County is land that was claimed by the United States government through forced displacement and treaties negotiated in bad faith. We acknowledge those of the Shawnee, Miami, Erie, Ottawa, Potawatomi, and Haudenosaunee Confederacy whose lands we stand on, and thousands of Native Americans representing over 100 tribes who currently live in Northeast Ohio today. We thank Lake Erie Native American Council for helping us develop this acknowledgement. We also want to take a moment to share that CAC's values equity. We choose to lead with racial equity in our work because the creation and perpetuation of racial inequities is embedded into government and grant making. We confront the white supremacy that resides in our work because racial inequities across all indicators of success are deep and pervasive. We also recognize the power and potential that organizations who produce arts and cultural programming have as bearers of culture. These institutions have the power to write the narrative about who belongs and who is valued. We encourage art organizations to connect with resources to advance equity in your own work. Please visit cacgrants.org/equity or contact either of the grant managers to learn more. With that being said, again, welcome to everyone who is just now joining us this afternoon. I hope this workshop will be helpful to you and your organizations as you prepare for CAC's application deadline over the next several weeks. In today's workshop, we cover CAC's mission, history, and purpose here in Cuyahoga County. We'll give an overview of CAC's 2026 grant opportunities, general operating support, and project support, and we'll outline the next steps for each organization. Of course, we'll leave room for questions. So if you have a question, please feel free to leave it in the chat. We'll have a brief moment to answer them, but we'll be sure to get back to you if we don't have the time. So Cuyahoga Arts and Culture is the public founder for nonprofit arts and cultural organizations in Cuyahoga County. And it's the largest funder of arts and culture in the region. CAC has invested more than $257 million in over 500 organizations since 2006 up to 2025. CAC has invested over $11.3 million through grants to organizations who bring arts and culture to life in our community. Cuyahoga County residents created CAC in 2006 when they approved a tax on cigarettes to support arts and culture in our community. Last year, in November 2024, Cuyahoga County residents approved a tax increase of the same levy, and this increase now runs through 2035. CAC is an independent political subdivision of the state of Ohio. Though we work closely with our local elected officials, we are not a part of the county government. Our mission is to inspire and strengthen the community by investing in arts and culture. Our vision is for all Cuyahoga County residents to experience a meaningful cultural life. Our workshop today is focused on CAC's 2026 grant opportunities. Our programs include General Operating Support, which provides unrestricted multi-year support grants to arts and cultural organizations based in and serving Cuyahoga County, and Project Support, which promotes and encourages the breadth of arts and culture programming in our community by funding projects of all sizes in Cuyahoga County. Our funding priorities remain unchanged from previous years. All CAC applicants use their applications and reports to demonstrate their alignment to CAC's funding priorities in relation to their CAC grant. The funding criteria for general operating support applicants should be applied to the whole organization and its programming. Once approved for funding, general operating support grantees will use these priorities to set goals and to report on throughout the grant year. For project support, we're looking to see how organizations meet this funding criteria through their project specifically. For project support, these priorities also serve as funding criteria by which panelists review and recommend applications for funding. Only project support applicants will go through panel this year. As a public funder, centering residents and community vibrancy is central to our work. It's meant to ensure grant recipients foster a sense of belonging for all residents through their publicly funded activities. With that being said, CAC's funding criteria are public benefit, or organization's ability to meaningfully connect with its community through its projects and/or programming, artistic and cultural vibrancy, an organization's ability to create relevant, engaging project or program, and organizational capacity, an organization's ability to successfully plan for and manage its project and programming. Public benefit carries the most weight for all grant applications, but we'll talk more about our funding criteria and how it's connected to your application in future workshops. In addition to our grants, CAC also invites you to connect with these other resources that we have. Arts and Culture Network Night is a great way to connect with artists, arts organizations, employees, and other creatives from relationship building, mutual support, and to spark new initiatives. Our next network night will be Thursday, May 29th from 6 to 8:30 p.m. And we'll show information about the program here as well. NeighborUp also provides small grants for arts and cultural projects with support from CAC. Their next deadline to apply is August 11th. And then we also have clevelandartevents.com. It's a great way to connect with Cuyahoga County's vibrant arts and culture scene. We invite you to visit clevelandartevents.com to view or join our directory of artists, post a portfolio or upcoming event, and to view current jobs and calls for artists. Now, with that being said, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Maya to dig into a little bit more of the 2026 grant opportunities in more detail.
Thank you, Devon. Okay. So before we dive into each grant program, we want to make sure that we emphasize that each program has received some changes for 2026. Even if you are familiar with our programs, it may be beneficial to review the guidelines thoroughly to be sure that you don't miss any vital information. With that being said, the purpose of general operating support is to strengthen community through meaningful, unrestricted, multi-year core support grants to arts and cultural nonprofit organizations based in and serving Cuyahoga County. General operating support grants are open to 501c3 organizations with a core mission of arts and culture as determined by CAC. In the chat, we'll drop a link to a helpful core mission determination document that provides more detail about how CAC makes these determinations. Grants may range from up to $5,000, up to $20,000, and from $20,000 up to $1 million for nonprofit organizations based in Cuyahoga County. SMU Data Arts Funder Report is required for all organizations. And GOS grants are matching grants. For grants of $5,000 or less, 50% of the match can be met through in-kind income. In-kind income can include donated goods, services, space, and volunteer hours. All grants more than $5,000 must be a cash match. So, what is arts and culture? Arts and culture is defined in the Ohio Revised Code, Chapter 3381, which is CAC's enabling law, as including but not limited to literature, theater, music, dance, ballet, painting, sculpture, photography, motion pictures, architecture, archaeology, history, natural history, or the natural sciences. Our definition is broad and include many different types of art forms, but we do have specific determinations of what is and isn't arts and culture. It's also important to point out that CAC's definition of arts and culture includes the natural sciences. This means that we fund science and nature-based programming in addition to other disciplines like music, performing arts, and visual art. For CAC to recommend applicants for funding for general operating support, each organization must have it articulated in their articles of incorporation and backed up by other publicly available materials that their core mission fits within this definition of arts and culture. The same thing goes for project support, whereas the core mission of the applicant will not be the focus, but the actual proposed project must fit within this definition of arts and culture. If you have questions, please contact CAC staff. So to be eligible for general operating support grant program, organizations must meet all the eligibility criteria. You must be a current 2025 general operating support grant recipient or have previously received and successfully completed at least 2 grants from Cuyahoga Arts and Culture within the last 4 years, so since 2021. This could have been completed through project support, cultural heritage, or general operating support. Further, the completion and approval of a final report following a grant award is what we consider to be a successfully completed grant. Organizations must have a core mission to produce, present, or create programs or activities in areas directly concerned with arts or cultural heritage as defined by the Ohio Revised Code for the general public. Organizations must have a permanent and viable base in Cuyahoga County for at least 3 years prior to July 31st, 2025. This means each organization must have a principal business address in Cuyahoga County and must conduct the majority of its programs and services in Cuyahoga County for the residents and visitors of Cuyahoga County. They must exist as a 501c3 organization for at least 3 years or be a successor to an arts or cultural organization that had been a 501c3 organization for at least 5 years prior to July 31st, 2025. Organizations must have an active board of at least 3 directors, be incorporated and authorized to do business in Ohio as verified by the Ohio Secretary of State. And on the other side of this table, we've listed a few types of organizations that are not eligible for this grant program, but please see the guidelines for the full listing. All eligible general operating support groups will not have to go to panel. And next, we'll break down the different award amounts and the financial documentation that is required for each. So grant amounts are determined by an organization's budget size as determined by an applicant's IRS 990 filing, audit, or independent financial reviews, and accompanying eligible revenue and support form. CAC will determine grant range eligibility through the application process based on the financial documentation provided and applicant budget size. All grant amounts are subject to CAC board approval and available funding. Grant amounts up to $5,000 are available for applicants who file IRS Form 990N. Grant amounts up to $20,000 are available for applicants who file a 990EZ or 990 but do not complete an annual audit or independent financial review. Grant amounts up to $20,000 are determined by an organization's average total revenue as recorded in IRS Forms 990 for fiscal years 2023 and 2024. Grant amounts from $20,000 up to $1 million for applicants with annual revenues of $200,000 or more, who also complete an annual audit or independent financial review and have a minimum of a 50% paid staff person. This is someone who works 20 hours per week. More information on our funding formula, matching requirements, and approval process can be found on page 7 for the General Operating Support Guidelines. So this wraps up the General Operating Support Grant. So I'm going to take a moment to answer any questions that you may have so far on General Operating Support before we move forward with project support. First, I'll start. Is there any questions in the chat already? I'm looking to Jake or Javon, anyone who.
I have a
Questions
question.
so far? Oh,
Go ahead, Delaney.
What is the SMU Data Arts Funder report?
Great question. So the SMU Data Arts Funder report, there is a cultural data profile that has a way to kind of track data and information related to the arts. So for organizations that have been in project support and have been completing grants that are 5,000 or less, may have not completed a cultural data profile in the past. So if you are eligible to move into general operating support and you haven't had the opportunity to complete the cultural data profile before, we definitely have a workshop for that, and we will walk you through that process. There's a slightly shorter form for those who do complete a 990N and will be eligible for a grant of 5,000 or less. For those of you that are eligible for a higher grant, you have more budget information to complete. But again, we'll kind of dig into that a little bit more with the getting started with your cultural data profile workshop. But essentially, it is a data information tool that tracks arts information.
Okay, is that like is that part of the application in the portal, or is that like a separate thing that we should go make an account for and start
It
on?
is a separate thing that you
Okay.
have a separate account for. Yes,
Okay, thank you.
no problem. Anyone else?
Yeah, we had a few more questions come in. The next one was, do you know the approved GOS allocation for 2026 and 2027? And I'm happy to speak to that. Yes, so the short answer is no. The allocation is typically approved towards the end of the year by our Board of Trustees at the same time as grants are awarded. We're only just a couple months in so far on our revenue for 2025, adjusted by the increase that's coming in from the tax increase that was approved in November. And so we are filling our coffers that were emptied over the past couple of years as we pushed out grants for 2024 and 2025. So we are continuing to monitor, and our board will have these discussions in September and then into the winter, and we'll be sure to keep you posted as those conversations progress as to how it's affecting our plans for the next year and how it will affect your grants. The next question was, for the second category, do you need 990 EZ or 990 for both years, or just the most recent?
You will need a 990 or 990 EZ for both years, fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 24.
Thank you. And the next one was, what is the budget size that requires an audit versus a financial review?
750,000, I believe, is the cutoff point.
Yes, and these are detailed in the grant guidelines. The next question is, so the first two levels of grant amounts are not directly determined by budget size, but only which form you file. I think the 990N is for organizations with budgets of 50,000 or less. So that is a direct correlation to organizational budget size. And then 990 EZs and 990s, obviously for organizations of larger financials. The EZ has a up to $200,000 limit there as well, I believe. And so those filings are directly correlated to budget size. And the requirement for an audit review starts for CAC at that $200,000 level. So yes, correlated to budget per the 990 form IRS requirements. Does that track, team? Is there anything else to add there? Great. Let's see. Next one was again relating to filed 990N this year, but filing the 990N this year, can I apply for up to $20,000? If you file a 990N, you'll be applying for up to $5,000 in GOS this year. I think that's all the questions I see in the chat thus far. Please continue to add your questions, and we'll also have time to come back to more questions at the end.
Great, thank you, Jake. Okay, so we're going to move forward to project support. And yes, as Jake mentioned, if you have questions that come up that you think of, feel free to put those in the chat and we'll return to those questions later. We know that this is new information, so maybe things are still percolating in your brain. Feel free to drop any question that comes to you. And yes, let's move on to project support. So the purpose of Cuyahoga Arts and Culture's Project Support Grant Program is to promote public access and encourage the breadth of arts and cultural programming in our community by supporting Cuyahoga County-based projects. Project support grants are open to 501c3 organizations, both with and without a primary mission of arts and culture as determined by CAC. Grants may range from $1,000 to $7,500 for nonprofit organizations based in Cuyahoga County. For project support, a one-to-one grant match is required. 50% of the match can be in kind for all project support grants. The remaining match must be cash, which could be other grants, donations, ticket revenues, scholarships, etc. So to be eligible for the 2026 project support grant, applicant organizations must meet all of the following eligibility criteria. You must be a 501c3 nonprofit organization as verified against IRS Publication 78 by the Go Verify service. Have a permanent and viable base of operations in Cuyahoga County for at least 1 year prior to July 31st, 2025. And have produced or presented arts or cultural programs open to the public.
I know. I was like, ooh, it's not what you think.
Did you mean? Thanks. Sorry. Have produced or presented arts or cultural programs open to the public within the previous 2 years prior to July 31st, 2025, and provide the required financial documents. All organizations should provide either a 990, 990N, or 990EZ for the most recently completed fiscal year. Incorporated and authorized, and you must be incorporated and authorized to do business in Ohio as verified by the Ohio Secretary of State. Within these eligibility requirements, many of the organizations that receive CAC funding do not have a primary mission of arts and culture, but are doing amazing arts and cultural programming through their work. Current and past grant recipients have included community development corporations, after-school programs, and mental health agencies, as well as organizations that focus only on arts and cultural programming. For a list of types of organizations who are ineligible to apply, please see our guidelines. Some examples include private non-operating foundations, units of government, and fundraising organizations such as Friends of Groups. Again, see the guidelines for a full list, please. The maximum grant amount that an applicant can request is determined by CAC staff as outlined here. Here are some notes for how your project support grant size is determined. Maximum grant request amounts are determined by organizations' CAC grant history and budget size, as determined by an applicant's IRS 990 filing as follows. The maximum grant request amount up to $5,000 is for new applicants or organizations who have not received funding from CAC within the last 4 years since 2021. This request amount is also for returning applicants who file an IRS Form 990N in their most recently completed fiscal year. The maximum request amount up to $7,500 is for returning applicants who have received funding from CAC within the last 4 years, who also file IRS Form 990 or Form 990EZ in their most recently completed fiscal year. Like general operating support, the application and approval process is highlighted in the project support guidelines on page 7 for you to review. However, for transparency, all recommended grant amounts will be shared with each applicant before CAC board approval. So what is a project? We define a project as a specific, connected set of activities with a beginning and an end, explicit goals or objectives, and a predetermined cost that does not equal the organization's total annual budget. Projects may be one-time events, such as a festival or exhibit, or a defined series of events, such as a roster of classes or a series of productions. Projects must start and end in the 2026 calendar year, so between January 1st through December 31st, 2026. Projects must be arts or cultural activities with a public arts and culture component. Projects must take place in Cuyahoga County. Projects that do not clearly articulate their public programming components will not be eligible for funding. And open to the public doesn't mean that the project or program must be free. Here are a few pictures from some of the events and activities that have been supported in part by CAC funding in the past. We're really excited to hear about your 2026 programs and activities, but before we move on, I want to pause again and see if there are any questions about anything that we've covered so far. Anything that came up for you about project support, or if you remembered a question about general operating support. I'll first look to see if is there anything in the chat, Jake?
I don't believe there's any additional questions at this time.
Great. I continue to invite you to enter any questions in the chat, and we can take a moment at the end if there's anything that comes up for anyone. So here are some additional opportunities to connect with our team for support. It's a link to register to our website, if we could add that to the chat. So some of our upcoming technical assistance opportunities include later this month, we'll be partnering with Plant Moran to have a 990 webinar. Early next month, we will have general operating support and project support workshops for the application process to speak more specifically about the questions and requirements regarding each program separately. We will also have office hours by our team to help with the application process and requirements. This is an informal space just for applicants to help answer any final questions as you move through the application. And in July, we'll have a workshop on the cultural data profile, and that will be hosted by SMU Data Arts. So there's lots of opportunities to connect with us, but also the grants management team is available to answer questions through the process as we go along. And an overview kind of our timeline. The application opened today. I saw a few of you guys got started immediately. Love to see it. From May through July, you should be getting connected with CAC by signing up for our email list if you aren't already on it, registering with our online application and reporting system, participating in technical assistance opportunities like workshops, like you're doing today, and office hours, and completing your application. For those of you familiar with our application process, you may notice that this year our eligibility check process and application form are now a one-step process to apply for either grant program. This must be completed by 4:30 p.m. on Thursday, July 31st, 2025. I will say that one more time. At 4:30 p.m. Thursday, July 31st, 2025. After that, all organizations' eligibility will be confirmed by CAC staff. Eligible general operating support applicants will then proceed to complete the eligible revenue and support form and SMU Data Arts cultural data profiles if applicable. Eligible project support applications will enter a panelist review process to determine if your application will be recommended to receive funding. Both of these next steps will reach completion by September 30th. After that, CAC board will approve grants at a public meeting, typically in November. Once approved, grant agreements will be issued and our team will be in touch as we prepare to begin the 2026 grant year. For key dates and explicit requirements, both are detailed on page 5 of the guidelines for both general operating support and project support. I will now turn it back over to my colleague Devon to provide quick screen share to assist your navigation of our website and application portal.
Thanks, Maya. There's a couple questions coming in the chat. If you want to maybe address those quickly before we proceed. Does that
Sounds good.
work? Great. The first question was, can a single organization apply for more than one project support grant in a calendar year?
No, you can apply for only one project support grant per year, and that also applies between general operating support and project support. You can only receive one CAC grant per year.
Thank you. The next one is, what kind of budget requirements are there for operating support?
What do you mean?
And I think that's just asking, but are there budget requirements? If you're thinking about operating support as it was in the past, so just to clarify, this year, general operating support is open to organizations of all budget sizes. So there isn't a minimum budget requirement. Your IRS Form 990 and staffing structure will determine how much you're eligible for as far as and how your CAC grant is calculated. So those details are all outlined in the guidelines, which we'll share a link to shortly and are available on our website. The next one was, will a program started before 2026, like a film that takes more than a year, be eligible for project support?
If you're applying for something that's specifically happening within 2026, so for example, you're doing a film premiere in 2026, and your application is the film premiere, which is just one day or one weekend, that is eligible if that is the project.
Yeah, I think that's a good question because we see a wide variety of projects and we're looking for the application to contain a discrete project that starts and ends in the calendar year of 2026. And so we understand arts and culture may take a long time. A lot of projects do span longer, but we would like for the applicants to outline a discrete component of a project or a specific project that meets those requirements. And there's more detail on that in the guidelines as well. And in our project support application workshop, which will be coming up next month. Jessica asks, I couldn't hear, no eligibility in June. Just to reiterate, there is a one-step process this year. So application is including both eligibility, formerly eligibility check, and application. So one deadline, July 31st, 4:30 p.m. for both programs, and that includes everything you need to complete to apply for 2026 funding. A question asks, if one of our concerts is presented outside of Cuyahoga County, would that prohibit us from applying for general operating support?
No, you would just be applying with the concerts that are occurring within Cuyahoga County. It's kind of just excluding that part of that and outside of your budget as well, if that makes sense. And if you, for all of these, if there's more specific questions that you want to ask your grant manager specifically, we're always happy to chat about specifics, but your budget and your application should only reflect what is occurring within Cuyahoga County.
And that's for project support, right, Maya?
Yeah.
Yes. So, and as we think about operating support, we're well aware that organizations do programming beyond the borders of Cuyahoga County. And so programming that takes place outside of the county is, of course, we know part of the operations of many of the groups that we fund. However, we're interested in the application focusing on programming that's taking place within Cuyahoga County. And then, you know, in your application, as well as your reports to CAC, will be focused on programming that takes place and your impact in Cuyahoga County. And we ask that CAC funds only be expended on programming that takes place in Cuyahoga County. Devon shares the links to the guidelines in the chats. Thank you. So we'll also share those again at the end and on our website. Our GOS grants, also one-year grants. That's an easy yes. They are a 2-year commitment, but all CAC grants are awarded for 1 year. So we're talking about the 2026-2027 GOS program, which means if you are approved for GOS funding, you'll be recommended for 2 years of the same amount. Those grants are only approved, though, by our board annually, of course, based on board approval and available funding, but it's a 2-year commitment. I hope that makes sense. Next, are these grants open to community improvement corporations for arts and culture programs, aka nonprofits associated with municipalities? And I think the answer to that is if you are an independent 501c3 nonprofit, we verify nonprofit status using GuideStar's charity check. And if you meet our other eligibility criteria, which are all part of the application process, then you would be eligible. As a non-core mission arts and culture organization, you'd be eligible for a project support grant. But again, if you have additional questions, please, take a look at the guidelines, the application, and reach out to our team. And let's see. Okay, the next question, I'll move here quickly, and then we may have to get back to the next part here, and we can follow up at the end. But there's a checklist on page 16 of the grant guidelines. Do we have to meet all the requirements? Does it impact funding? This is speaking about the governance checklist, I believe, in the general operating support grant guidelines. And I think we ask that you complete that as part of the due diligence to the application. If there are questions that our staff has, we use that to follow up with you directly during the application process. So it will be addressed on a case-by-case basis. And but I don't believe it's not directly correlated to funding decisions. So it's not an eligibility checklist, it is a governance checklist. Hope that clarifies there. Lastly, a link to register or produce the cultural data profile report. Yes, we'll share links here at the end and again in the guidelines and on our website. Okay, I know that was a lightning round, but that's it for now. I'll turn it back to Devon for our walkthrough of the screen share.
Thank you, Maya and Jake. I just want to make note here that we will have 2 upcoming workshops. So we will talk about each program individually. You'll get this information sent to you guys afterwards, including links as well as the SMU Cultural Data Profile link. You will all receive this information following this workshop. But for now, I wanted to take a moment to orient you to where you can find information beyond this workshop. So we're going to switch over to a screen share so that way we can help you navigate the website a little bit more. So cacgrants.org is our website, and it has some very useful tools for the grant application period. The most important being the grant guidelines, as we share them in the links. You will always have access to the guidelines for our programs via the website. So even outside of the links that we shared, you'll be able to navigate over to our website and access those yourselves. The guidelines are board-approved documents that serve as a roadmap for the grant application and program year. All the information that we've discussed in this workshop connects back to those guidelines. So I recommend anyone applying for a grant to review those documents carefully. To find those guidelines, you can click the Grants tab at the top of the page on the left-hand side. A drop-down list will appear, and you can click Overview to view each program's guidelines. So as you can see here, you're going to want to make sure that you're specifically looking at the 2026 oriented guidelines for this application season. The grant pages also have other useful information to refer to, like workshops, deadlines, and the link to the online application and reporting system, which is where you'll submit the application. On any page of the website, you can navigate to the upper right-hand corner to quickly get to the online application and reporting system. As mentioned, the applications are completed using our online application and reporting system. So this is the same system we used last year. You also have the option to type in cacgrants.smapply.org to access this site as well. Returning applicants can use their same login information, and new applicants will create a new account. Once logged in, you'll want to hit the Programs button in the upper right-hand corner to access the new 2026 applications. Please keep in mind that when you're completing your application, you'll designate a primary contact at your organization who will receive all the communications from CAC going forward. So be sure that this person understands their role and is a regular email checker. Also note, any task or application that you complete in the system, you must not only mark as complete, but you must also click submit. Not submitting could result in your application not being reviewed for eligibility. And we'll share more about the application process in our upcoming application workshops for both general operating support and project support. And that pretty much concludes our screen sharing. So you've made it successfully through the 2026 Grant Opportunities webinar. We will now hold space for any questions that you have. We are aware that this is a lot of information, so if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to us and we'll respond to you accordingly.